Hello everybody, I'm KC and welcome to our edition of Let's Talk About, and welcome to the latest installment of To Infinity War and Beyond. And now it's time to return to a far-off galaxy and catch up with the most unconventional heroes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and at this point, that's really saying something, in Guardians of the Galaxy, Volume 2. Continuing their antics through space while trying to work together, the Guardians encounter Peter's long-lost father, the appropriately named Ego, played by Kurt Russell, which sends Peter and the rest of the Guardians on another soul-searching journey to better themselves, and in the process save the universe, because why not? As much as I did enjoy the first Guardians of the Galaxy, I didn't get as into it as almost everyone else did. So even though I was still looking forward to the sequel, I wasn't as excited as I was for the last couple of movies we talked about. But after finishing it, I honestly think this is the better of the two. Or at the least, it appeals to me more. One of the things that I think struck a chord with people in the first movie was that in a time when we've been trying to take superheroes more seriously, Guardians was so unashamed to just have fun. It's a ridiculous premise, and the movie flaunts that unabashedly. And it seems like that's going to be a trend as this becomes a franchise. Volume 2 really cranked up the insane antics to 11, with a lot more comedic moments during the action, more vulgar humor, and there are even points where the editing is quite a bit different from the first movie and makes it seem more cartoonish. In any other franchise, this would be a problem, but again, gun-shooting raccoon. Guardians can get away with a constant shift in tone because that's just the kind of reputation it's built. The overall production continues to impress and deliver something special. While last time gave us a great look at this world's gritty underbelly, this time the Guardians wind up in more varied and beautiful parts of the galaxy. So the overall production is much more vibrant and colorful, but just as gorgeous. And even though I'm sure this goes without saying, because I didn't mention it last time, the soundtrack is an instant win. I personally always got a kick out of the Guardians' main theme, and the mix of 70s pop music, especially during the action scenes, is always awesome. And on top of David Hasselhoff having a cameo, he even performed a 70s style pop song about the Guardians for the credits, which then got this music video performed by the cast, which is just nothing I say could do it justice. It just needs to be witnessed. But like the first movie, it's able to take time to take what's going on in this movie seriously, because things get a lot heavier this time around. It has a great story and escalating threat that directly affects our heroes. You know, that thing the first movie didn't really have? The original Guardians wasn't big on telling an intricate story, and that is something this movie has going for it over the first one for me, because there's no loose ends or confusing exposition. Everything from the opening battle to the Ravagers to Ego has a major part to play in this story, mostly in showing where the Guardians are as far as becoming a team. And I do like how there is still a lot of progress to be had with this group. It's not like the Avengers in Age of Ultron where they knew each other's strengths and weaknesses and became a well-rounded team. They were all loners, and now they're a bunch of loners who have friends to back them up. And they're not even great friends. They fall on old habits, pick on each other, and constantly argue. But that makes sense. It's a more realistic approach to the redemption arcs they're all in the middle of, which is refreshing. Usually a character who's been redeemed either completely changes their personality when they become one of the good guys, or keeps some of their general nastiness and mischief, and are seen as a tolerable nuisance. And while you could definitely say the rest of the galaxy sees the Guardians that way, they are still our main heroes. While this movie has more of a focus on redemption through familial connections, it is still about redemption, mostly by looking at what made the Guardians the way they are from a different perspective, and deciding who to let in for the sake of changing for the better, and who to shut out. Besides Groot, who's in the process of being reborn and is basically just here to be cute, I'd say the character who's changed the most between movies was Drax. At first I was put off by how much he laughs and gets excited about things because it was so different from what he was in the first movie. But given that Drax's species revolves around the idea of brutal honesty being beautiful, now that he's moved past his desire for revenge, he's much more jovial in almost any experience the movie throws at him because he has no shame in showing those emotions when he feels them. But that doesn't mean he's completely over his grief. This scene where Mantis reads his emotions is probably one of my favorites in the movie. I don't think I need to explain why that worked as well as it does, but damn is that the medium of a film at its best. Speaking of Mantis, played by Palm Clemente, she's our only new character besides Ego, and she's, you know, fine. I don't really have much to say about her. Her powers are kind of cool and have potential, but that's about it. I'm also not crazy about a potential romance between her and Drax, but that's just me. Gamora has always been the level-headed one in the group, and that hasn't changed. But her biggest hurdle in this movie is learning how to let people in, express herself, and let her guard down a little. She has some great scenes with Peter, with both trying to be supportive towards him and putting him in his place when he starts to act like an entitled jackass.
It's a show that doesn't exist. That's why it would get 0 ratings.
I don't know what Cheers is!
I still love how they're approaching that relationship. While in the first movie, Gamora was running away from her past to try to make a new life for herself, she now has to confront in more ways than one what she left behind, specifically Nebula. And I want to give a special shout out to Karen Gillan this time around, because from revenge-fueled anger to sorrow and contempt, Nebula gets so much more depth in this movie. Like with the Guardians, we see how Nebula's upbringing with Thanos shaped her into what she is now, and how her lack of compassion from the closest thing she had to family in Gamora made her so bitter. But this movie gives them both the first steps towards growing into something better by being able to open up and count on each other. Rocket is still my favorite character in the group, even though he's probably grown the least since last time. He's still very funny and really an asset to the team, but it's probably the one who is the least open about how he feels. He hides behind his cocky attitude to guard himself, and either because he doesn't think he deserves friends or family, or because he believes he'll eventually do something to drive them away, he just falls back on old habits. And a lot of this doesn't even come to light with his team, but with Yondu, and their scenes together are some of my favorites in the movie. That doesn't mean the rest of the group hasn't left an impression on him, he's just not used to anyone giving a damn about him. One of my favorite little moments from Rocket is when it's his idea to play some of Peter's music when he and Yondu escape. It's a nice touch. Speaking of Peter, his arc in this movie is interesting. From becoming the default leader of the team to finding out he has power similar to his immortal celestial father, he develops quite a bit of an ego himself, with things like acting pretty entitled to pursuing a romance with Gamora, to the ongoing measuring of a certain appendage contest between him and Rocket. But even though these aren't major faults for him, you can sort of understand why he almost gives in to Ego's plan despite all of the red flags. After spending most of his life in space, finding something even remotely close to home, especially a part of his family, is a big deal for him. Yes, his arrogance is part of what makes him believe in Ego so much, but it's also his desire to have a family again. He lost the only family he'd ever known when his mom died, and it's his connection to her that makes him fall for Ego's words, and what makes him realize who his family really is. It's good stuff, and surprisingly doesn't completely take over the movie. Everyone gets a fairly equal amount of screen time, which for a movie as loaded as this is remarkable. Which brings us to our not at all surprising villain, Ego. And even though you could tell the whole time this guy was up to something, can we agree that he is one of the best Marvel villains so far? Especially after the blue blob of meh that was Ronan. I do really appreciate how well they foreshadow that Peter's father was something old and mysterious, and now we find out that he's practically a god. And not just any god, but one that is striving so much for a greater purpose that he wants to consume the entire galaxy in his image to become every living thing in the universe, and something about this suddenly sounds familiar. It'll come to me. Ego is a great, holier-than-thou villain, with enough power to back up his ambitions and enough of Kurt Russell's charm to convince Peter that he's the good guy. To the point that even though you can tell this guy's going to be the villain, discovering just how much of a lack of empathy Ego has is just shocking.
It broke my heart to put that tumor in her head. What?
This is some really heavy stuff, but the movie really pulls off this concept and gives it an excellent payoff with Peter's resistance. And it plays into the theme of redemption in the opposite direction, that some people are so consumed by their own selfish ambitions that they lose that chance of redemption. And how Peter is better than his father because he realized that he's not better than anyone.
If you kill me, you'll be just like everybody else.
What's so wrong with that?
It's in stark contrast with the actions of Peter's other father. Yondu's arc in this movie is probably the best representation of how redemption works in this series. That some people get a tough break through abuse, tragedy, prejudice, whatever, and that could shape a lot of who they become and how they try to get by. The biggest accomplishment a redemption arc can have is believably rising above whatever crap made them a really selfish or terrible person. That does not mean that excuses or erases the mistakes and damage they have done, as shown in the movie, but it also doesn't mean they shouldn't strive to be better, and that should be celebrated. We learn a lot more about Yondu in this movie, and while that doesn't excuse the way he treated Peter, there was enough compassion in Yondu that made him constantly stick up for Peter. And it was that connection with him that made Yondu want to be better. And even if it was at the end of his life, Yondu still sacrificed himself to save Peter and the universe. And yeah, I cried. Don't act like you didn't. Of course I'm upset Michael Rooker isn't going to be in these movies anymore. He was great. Overall, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is just as entertaining as its predecessor, with even more heart to back it up. Guardians is definitely the most comedic franchise Marvel has created so far, and the fact that it can carry some of the most emotionally charged moments in the MCU really speaks to how well balanced this movie is. It's hilarious and heartbreaking, charming and tragic, a ton of fun that really makes you feel the feels. With a remarkable cast and a marvelous crew bringing this world to life, it makes every trip into the stars of the Marvel Universe all the more exciting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. I also noticed that there were a lot of Easter eggs in this movie, but only having a passing knowledge of the Marvel Universe means that I can tell when I should be excited about something, but have no idea what it is. The only one I feel like I do know is...
I think I shall call him... Adam.
Adam. I know that name, but I can't think of who it is. Well, we'll just have to wait until Guardians 3. Oh my god, it's Adam Warlock.